So now it's time to do a little bit of a comparative look at digestive systems of different organisms. We're going to start by looking at teeth and seeing how teeth vary from one group of organisms to another. I've got three drawings here on the board that represent the kind of attachment of teeth to the jawbone. So in blue here I have the jawbone and then the tooth on top. This first kind of tooth, the simplest form of tooth attachment to the jaw, is just kind of a flat attachment to the surface of the jaw. Right on the very rim of the jaw. It's kind of the weakest form of attachment. This is called acrodont. Acrodont. We see this mostly in fishes and some amphibians, well, most amphibians, I guess. Next, this attachment has part of the tooth attaching on the side of the jaw as well as up toward the crest of the jawbone. This is called pleurodont dentition, when you have attachment to the rim of the jaw. This is common in lizards and snakes. The next type is where we have socketed teeth. Now, of course, humans have socketed teeth, but crocodilians also have socketed teeth. This condition is called thecodont. Thecodont dentition. Socketed teeth. And some of the dinosaurs also had socketed teeth, the thecodont condition. Even some of the fossil birds that had teeth, their teeth were socketed teeth as well. So let's look at some actual examples of acrodont, pleurodont, and thecodont teeth. Here's our first example of tooth attachment type. I hope you can see that in there. This is the acrodont type of dentition. Acrodont. It's attached right on the rim of the jaw, the way it's connected there. This is a gar fish. So straight pointed needle-like teeth set right on the rim of the jaw. Our next example here is from a iguana, and here the teeth are set so that they attach on, they have almost like exposed roots on the inside of the jaw, the way that's set up there. So that's a iguana, a lizard, example of a lizard. So this is mostly in lizards and snakes where you see this kind of pleurodont dentition, pleurodont condition. And then finally, teeth set in sockets. We have this crocodilian, this alligator skull here. And you can see on some of these teeth how they're set into a socket in the jawbone. So those are our three tooth types. We're going to look at a whole series of terms here that regard different kinds of teeth. Important to the comparative anatomy of vertebrates regarding tooth types. First of all, homodont versus heterodont. Homodont refers to the same tooth. That means all the teeth in the mouth are basically the same shape. We saw that in different kinds of fish, amphibians, reptiles. They all have basically the same kind of tooth, and they're almost always just straight up and down kind of teeth. Just a whole series of pointed teeth that extend off of the jaw, whether it be acrodont, pleurodont, or thecodont type teeth. They're just all the same. Homodont dentition. You don't see much variation in most species of non-mammalian groups. There are a few fish and maybe some lizards that have the beginnings of what look to be more molar-like teeth, more flattened type teeth in some parts of their mouth. When you have different kinds of teeth in the dentition in the mouth, some for sharp cutting, some for grinding, and so forth, we call that the heterodont dentition. And of course, we are heterodont. We have our incisors, canines, premolars, and molars. Different kinds of teeth for different functions in the same mouth. So this is almost exclusively a mammalian condition, this heterodont condition. So just to make an illustration of that, so in the front you have your sharp incisors that have a sharp edge along there for cutting. Then you have your canine tooth then you have your molars, premolars rather, and then you have more flat molars in the back. So you have a whole series of different kinds of teeth for different functions. Next, triconodont and trituberculate teeth. Triconodont means that the tooth has 3 points on it. So this kind of tooth, so there's a point, and there's a point. So you imagine from the side, it's not very good. Here we go, something like this, where there are 3 in a row, 3 points on the tooth, triconodont. This is a kind of tooth that was seen in the transition from non-mammals to mammals. Some of the earliest mammal type organisms in the fossil record had molar-like teeth that had these 3 points in a row, triconodont condition. So that's considered the most primitive kind of like back molar type tooth seen in early mammals. Trituberculate is very similar to that. Here the tooth, instead of having 3 points in a row, they are offset. And you can imagine that the opposite jaw would have points that would be offset from those for good crushing activity in the trituberculate type of tooth or molar tooth in some of those early mammals, but more advanced than the triconodont condition. So both of these are considered very primitive mammalian tooth types. Polyphyodont, diphyodont, and monophyodont. This has to do with the number of sets of teeth that an animal will have. If it's polyphyodont, then it replaces its teeth on a regular basis. We think of sharks and crocodilians and other reptiles as being polyphyodont. They often replace teeth. One would fall out, a new one will grow in, so they're always replacing their teeth. Diphyodont, 2 sets of teeth. That's like humans. We have our what we call milk teeth, deciduous teeth, or baby teeth that are lost, and then we grow our permanent teeth, our second set. So we're diphyodont. Monophyodont means you just get 1 set of teeth. Examples of monophyodont mammals include the platypus, sloths, seals, the dolphins. All of those things have just 1 set of teeth. Here we have some more terminology: cecodont, solenodont, lophodont, and bunodont. A cecodont type tooth is a shearing type of tooth. We see that we usually think of dogs as having a shearing type of tooth for getting meat off of a bone. If you've ever watched a dog try to get the meat off the outside of a bone, how they'll turn their mouth turn it to the side and try to get behind their canines back there to where they have good shearing action to remove the meat from the bone. Solenodont type tooth is like what we see in a deer. In this type of tooth, they develop a layer of enamel over dentin, and the enamel wears away rather quickly because they chew on woody stems. So a lot of that wears off. So we're left with a tooth that's worn off on the surface. All that enamel goes away, and then you've got a tooth that has exposed ridges of enamel and dentin. And where the dentin is, it starts to wear away more rapidly. So that's going to wear away, that's going to wear away, that's going to wear away. So we end up with these depressed areas where the dentin is being worn away, where the enamel still remains, it forms sharper ridges. That makes a very good grinding surface for chewing on woody stems and leaves and such. So that kind of material gets broken up. So here we have enamel exposed on the surface, and where it wears away more, that's the dentin of the tooth wearing away there. So over the years, a tooth on a deer or a similar animal will get worn away more and more and more. Kind of helps you estimate the age of them, and when you take a deer in to be checked, they usually look at the teeth to estimate the age of the animal. Lophodont is a very similar kind of tooth to a solenodont tooth in terms of having the enamel and dentin exposed on the surface, but this is in elephants. And it's a very long tooth with lots of ridges along its length. So that's the Lophodont type tooth. Bunodont type tooth is a blunt top tooth like our molars are in our mouth. Pigs have the same kind of molar type arrangement. So it's a, we'll say a blunt top. It's fairly flat surface for crushing food, covered with enamel. No exposed dentin, not supposed to have any exposed dentin anyhow in that kind of a tooth. So we've got shearing teeth, we've got solenodont type teeth with a rough grinding surface. We've got the exaggerated form of that in elephants, the Lophodont type tooth, and then we've got the bunodont type tooth. We're going to look at examples of different digestive systems, the whole gut tube, in different kinds of organisms now, different kinds of vertebrate organisms, starting with a lamprey. In the lamprey, we have a pharynx region in the front that leads into an esophagus. There's no stomach in the lamprey, no stomach. And so we just go from this esophagus into an intestine, and in the intestine there's what we call a spiral valve, a spiral valve. It's not a true complete separation in here, it's more of a curtain. I have in there intestine with spiral curtain partition. So we have this fold that hangs down from the wall, and it kind of undergoes a twist as it goes down the length of the intestine. There. So anyway, that's the lamprey digestive system. Very simple. It does have a cloaca in the back end over here. It all empties into a cloaca, the digestive tube. The shark digestive system, behind the pharynx, it has the esophagus, then it has a stomach. Stomach has this typical curved shape to it that we see in a lot of different animals. And then when you go into the intestine, it does not have a large and small intestine, and it doesn't have a simple curtain of tissue that twists as it goes through the intestine. It has what we call a spiral valve. It does this continual twist. It's like an auger or drill bit kind of arrangement. So it goes around and around, spiral staircase you might compare it to, but anyway. So the food has to go through these spaces around and around as it goes down through the gut. And obviously that increases the amount of surface area that is exposed to the food for digesting the food and so on. So this modification, the spiral valve structure, continues through all of the chondrichthyan fish into the simpler forms of osteichthyan fish as well. Polypterus has this, the gar has this, for example. Back here on the cloaca, there's a special rectal gland that develops in the shark that helps to excrete some of the salt, to reduce the salt content in the body. In the teleost digestive system, you have the esophagus and stomach as you did with the shark. Where the stomach and the intestine meet, there are these extensions, these finger-like outgrowths called pyloric cecae. Pyloric cecae. Beyond that, we don't have a spiral valve in the more advanced bony fish, the teleost fish. But we start to see this lengthening of the intestine instead. And again, the intestine ends at the cloaca. All of these organisms will have the intestine end at the cloaca, except for the mammals. In the amphibians, for the first time in all of these organisms, we see a separation of the intestine into a small intestine and large intestine. So we have esophagus, stomach, small intestine, large intestine, and cloaca. Typical amphibian digestive tube. This is the primitive tetrapod arrangement. So when we get to tetrapods, we have small and large intestines. The bird's digestive system also has small and large intestine. It has esophagus and stomach. It has some modifications along the way. Off the side of your esophagus, there's a structure called the crop. You can sometimes see this in a bird that's eaten a good meal and it has a long, narrow neck. You can see a big outpouching of its throat there in some birds, that crop. The stomach is divided into a storage area more at the top and then a more muscular gizzard portion of the stomach. You've all heard of the gizzards in birds and may have eaten chicken gizzards, but anyway, that's the stomach portion that has this thick musculature, heavy musculature in there, the gizzard of a bird. And it's used to grind up things that are more difficult to digest, hard seeds and so on, that an animal might ingest, or even bones in some cases. So anyway, many birds will eat small bits of grit and rock to keep in their gizzard so that it helps them to grind up things in the gizzard. Then you have your small intestine. Between your small intestine and your large intestine, these outgrowths called cecae remember in the teleos fish we had some pyloric cecae coming off up here, but here it's between the small and large intestine instead of between the stomach and the intestine of a fish. And then finally, the mammalian digestive tube is just what we expect to see. The esophagus, the stomach, same as in humans, small intestine, cecum, large intestine, no cloaca. No cloaca here. So next we'll say a word about different kinds of stomachs, and we'll be finished with the digestive system. All right, in our first two pictures here, we have, in our first example, this is a monotreme, so our platypus and our spiny anteater, or echidna, would be this type of a stomach. It's a stomach that has a sac where food would first go when it first comes in, and may sit there a while before it's moved into this part of the stomach and into the intestine. This is a very sac-like stomach. Its epithelial lining is not like the lining of our stomach at all. It does not have the gastric pits and glands and the secretion types that our stomach would have. This is more just a storage sac than a digestive organ in that way. Next to it here we have a whale stomach. Has basically the same shape almost as a monotreme stomach to it, but in the whale it has one storage area, kind of like all of the stomach in the monotreme, but then it has an area of the stomach over here that it has all of the stomach glands and digestive functions we associate with the human stomach in there. So it has just a sac-like storage part, and then it has a secretory portion to the stomach. So it has a non-secretory and secretory part. The hamster stomach is a definite two-part stomach, with one having a lining that is not secretory, just a storage kind of section to this part of the hamster stomach, and then that food can then be pushed over into the secretory portion of the stomach where more digestive activity occurs. You start to secrete those digestive enzymes and stomach acids and so on to start the digestion in this part before moving into the intestine down below. The bovine, the cattle, the ungulates that chew their cud have a special kind of stomach. The food comes down and first goes into a region of the stomach that's for storage, and a lot of bacterial fermentation of the material going on in here. It is then regurgitated, pushed into this little chamber, which pushes the stomach contents back up into the mouth where it can chew the cud. Do more chewing, swallow again, so it mixes back and forth through here. Eventually is moved into this chamber of the stomach, which lies next to the fourth chamber, which is the secretory section over here. Each one of these sections has its name. This is called the rumen. This is reticulum. Reticulum. This is the omasum. And this is the abomasum. You don't need to know those terms, but it's interesting to know that the different parts of the cow stomach have different names to them. Complex structure. But only the last part of it here being a secretory portion. Finally, the human stomach is completely secretory. The entire wall of the stomach has secretory function from top to bottom. So all of this is a secretory portion. We do not have a non-secretory portion to our stomach. Not all portions of the stomach are equal. The cardiac portion up here does not produce the acid and enzyme component that the remainder of the stomach does. And there's less acid produced down in the pyloric region of the stomach as well. There's less digestive enzyme, rather, produced down in the lower end of the stomach next to the pylorus. There's still stomach acid produced here, but no acid or enzyme produced up here, but it's still glandular. It's still producing mucus secretion and all that. So anyway, all of this is secretory in the human stomach.